because they know they can do anything and you'll remain loyal. It's always about being able to take a step back and calling them out, about being able to see someone like Austin's actions for what they are. Eventually, people did see it in Austin's case. And thanks to social media and actual records, people managed to properly bring these cases forward. And hopefully it won't be too long until he's serving some real jail time and isn't a danger to anyone else. Unfortunately, this could and should have been dealt with earlier, and there are people who are responsible for that. The story of Austin Jones is a story of manipulation in many ways. I want to make it abundantly clear that a lot of the techniques that he used in his videos are the exact same techniques that might be used by people with genuine intent to convey a message. There are many people who sit down and explain their actions in an honest manner. However, in the context of this situation, it becomes quite clear that what he said was not the truth. And even if it was, he clearly consciously used it as an excuse rather than actually believing it as a sincere retrospective analysis of his actions. He doesn't have the capacity to be sincere. You have to pay close attention and extract the facts in these situations. Dealing with serious allegations here, there isn't room for leverage. And people should have identified that when the DMs originally surfaced, that he was transparently taking advantage of people, suggesting that they weren't his biggest fan for not twerking for them. That's not fun and games. People seem to overlook how genuinely disgusting a lot of his language was, and how that should have indicated that he was a nasty, nasty cretin, even with what he was demanding. I hope he goes away for a very long time. It's clear that he has failed to learn what he likes to call his mistakes. Huge shout out to my editors. This was a long one, my longest one for a while, I think. I really do. On the board right now, fantastic, lovely people. Keep great work.
267. Oh, 08 41
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Opinion, the home they track with too much free time. And, oh boy, have we got a lot to unbox today. In case anyone isn't aware, I've reviewed music on this channel. I've covered various controversies with regards to music. I've talked about provocative content, and it creates probably some of my most polarizing content. I'm also a trained singer-songwriter, and I guarantee when I get the chance, The Right Opinion is dropping a fucking fire album that blows all of the...
267 08 41 31. Okay, tell number 685 382 274. Which one? That same one? 685 382 274.
How much? Two G's.
0 0 0. I can't see my keys. Bro, that money made me.
Absolutely water. But that's besides the point. I realised that when I'm doing longer content, that it's not going to be so easy to just chuck out my opinions on music. And often, given the length of the song, it's hard to talk in the mini documentary styles that I do. But that won't stop me from trying. And every now and then, an absolute sitter comes in, and I have to take a swing. Enter stage left Nicole Arbor, the comedian/YouTube personality that's caused a fair bit of commotion throughout her career. Infamously, in 2015, she decided to release a video known as Dear Fat People, in which she criticized obese individuals for their excessive weight and told them to lose it in quite a crude manner.
Dear fat people, some people are already really mad at this video. What are you gonna do, fat people? What are you gonna do? Wait, are you gonna chase me? Really? You gonna chase me? It's gonna be like fucking Frankenstein. I can get away from you by walking at a reasonable pace. Frankenstein? Not so fast.
A lot of people took offense to the blunt way that she attacked others, and yes, it is rather provocative. And revisiting it in preparation for this video, in all honesty, the only thing I actually found offensive was how unfunny it was. Now, I accept comedy is subjective, but it was all this distraction comedy with no real punchline to me. But yeah, that regards, I can understand why people were annoyed by it. And in true controversial fashion, she released a part 2, I assume because she had so much more to develop from the first one. But it had been a couple years and she had ducked out of the public eye. I certainly wasn't thinking about her. Enter stage right, Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, the jack of all trades, had been praised for his work all over the spectrum of media, from script writing to music production. I have to give him props for that. I respect that grind. But realising that he had yet to make a vociferous political statement, he decided that why not infuse that with his natural talents, and brought us This Is America. The meticulously crafted creation impressed me on both a technical level and an interpretive level. As someone who really does enjoy artistry, I cannot express how much I appreciate the detail of the subtext and imagery. Too many artists just don't appreciate how much more potent it can make your content. I think that part of the appeal is the multitude of interpretations, and I'm glad that people are discussing it, and hopefully it will inspire more profound conversation. But nothing is sacred, and Nicole Arbor saw a chance to give it her own spin. Well, not necessarily her own personal spin, but a women's spin. One for women's rights and highlighting their maltreatment in modern American society. How brave. Now, if you are familiar with me and the title of this video, you will be bracing for what is an inevitable amount of criticism that is about to be thrown her way. My opinion is that this is bad. Very bad. I'd heard she'd responded to some of the criticism, and when I read it, she really did make a compelling case for her content. And then I went and watched it again, and reminded myself that actually it was pretty bad, and it did deserve this video. Due to the backlash, she has subsequently disabled ratings and comments, but it wasn't well received to say the least at first, with many people claiming she had completely butchered what the original stood for. Now, many have criticised her as making a cynical cash-in, riding on the coattails of something so much better. But I'm going to go into this video with an optimistic outlook of her character. The right opinion is a pure heart. He believes in benefit of the doubt. What a merciful soul I am. I think the fact that she's white doesn't really undermine the message necessarily. The validity of the statements about general issues are not dependent on who is saying it. Only statements about personal experience might be able to be judged on such a merit. Though I have to say, I do find it quite weird out of everyone to make such a unique commentary on the female American experience. It was a Canadian. And let me make this clear, I think anyone can talk about politics from foreign countries. I talk about American politics all the time, but this is so identifiably, quintessentially American, it seems exceptionally strange for her to come and speak about it herself. However, as we will soon find out, Arbor's version isn't really that American. You're obviously going to be compared on many levels to the original, especially if you try and draw parallels, which is what Nicole Arbor attempts to do. So you better make sure yours at least bangs, right? Right. I know a lot of people have memed it and laughed at it, and I've done that as well. A majority of people do agree that it's pretty bad. But no one's tied down the little details that, in my opinion, make it much more egregious than the mediocre offerings often presented to us within musical wokeness. I hope that today's video will not just provide a comprehensive criticism of the individual in question, but also give some valuable lessons that everyone can take something away from in critical thinking. So today I'm going to be explaining my problems with Nicole Arbor's musical magnum opus. This is known as This Is America, Women's Edits. And boy, are you in for a treat. Without further ado,
Happy New Year. What?
When I was in my accident, I didn't know what the devil was going on, but I knew I needed
Didn't
help.
know what the devil. What
let's
the
get to
devil
it.
was doing.
Let's discuss the premise. Now, when your video is titled This Is America, what is the first thing that comes to mind? That this is America. This video is going to be documenting the struggles that will make someone think of that message. Now, in this instance, with regards to the original title, Childish Gambino made it quite clear that there was a level of exclusivity to his statements. With all these various coinciding messages, it created an image of something very specific to America. maybe even being able to specify it to a specific indictment of media-driven fantasy within America and their relationship with the deeply impoverished reality of many of its systems, a juxtaposition whose magnitude is arguably very unique to the US. Therefore, anyone who does copy the message has to at least use that template. What do we get with Nicole Arbour? Well, a string of messages that don't really come together at all, especially with regards to America. Let's try to break this down. Now, it's important to note that Nicole Arbour clarifies the target of the video as North America to try and sidestep the inevitable criticism that she's not from the States, and we'll address this response later. So, where can we stop? A high majority of the problems listed off by Nicole Arbour are America. But there are also a multitude of other countries across the world, so immediately the statement, "This is America," does not hold the same weight. Let's break down some of the original messages and have a gander. She wrote a little Instagram post where she listed off all the topics that she was trying to touch on. I want to knock two on the head fairly immediately. The shaming of breastfeeding, I assume she means public breastfeeding, and the gender pay gap. Okay, let's say these are problems. Are they really American? The stigma around breastfeeding exists throughout the world, and the gender pay gap is a very complex question, and people haven't solved it not because they're not aware of it, but because people don't agree on how to solve it, or even whether it needs to be solved or not. Chris Hornsby did a song in 1987 called The Way It Is. Smash hit, incredible piano work, but it was also a statement about civil rights, and in it he makes the statement that although civil rights laws have been established, some people will be racist and prejudiced nonetheless, because the law doesn't change in their minds, and it is something that we should challenge without a doubt, but it's a slow process, but the reason we have certain things isn't because we don't know it exists. We completely get it. With issues like this, if discrimination exists, the fact that both the rights of breastfeeding and equal pay are protected by legislation makes the problem more difficult than just noticing it. You can't actively discriminate on the basis of gender, and you're allowed to publicly breastfeed, apart from in Idaho. So if you want to make a point about Idaho, then go for it. But for some reason, I don't think this is an open attack on Idaho. Legislation isn't the problem necessarily, it's a mentality. It's the fact that some people are still judgmental. Now, if you want to argue with them, then more power to you. But observing that it exists is not an argument in itself. It'd be like me saying racism exists. Okay, where's my fucking Nobel Peace Prize? We've passed that stage, Nicole. People have already developed their arguments on these topics. You're decades behind. And besides that,
How much are you going to
this is
give
not
her?
just America. This is a multitude of cultures, including America. And yes, I know she included a specific case about cheerleaders, but that's almost a red herring in a way. It's providing a specific example, and therefore concluding that the problem itself must be specific, which isn't the case. The problem will give many specific examples all over the world. That does not undermine its generality. Let's talk about sexual assault and harassment, two other topics that she touches on. It would be crossed up in the other two topics I just mentioned because although they're also legislated against a different type of issue, a much more serious one, sexual harassment and assault are definitely women's issues, and we should definitely be working to stem those issues. But once again, it's not necessarily a cultural phenomenon, and reports have been on the decline. Criminal activity will always exist. It's just unfortunately given the matrices of power passed down successive societies that pride themselves against women in those subjects, just like a majority of other crimes are slanted against men. We shouldn't accept it by any means, but it's not stimulated solely in America. Now, at this point, some may argue that this is a point against a lot of Childish Gambino's points, and although not entirely incorrect, Gambino appears to be outlining an environment that has cultivated the current predicament, and each individual general problem crafts an individual image that is fairly specific to America, with its hysterical media almost acting as a source of supernormal stimuli, detracting from the disturbing truth. It is central to every problem that Gambino crafts, creating an image that, although affecting a general population, is very specific in its framework. Arbour seems to sort a load of problems, but none of them seem to go together to create anything particularly coherent other than a collection of observations linked by the fact that they're primarily women's issues. And that's in part why, message-wise, it fails so badly. Not because she's necessarily white, that's a lazy cop-out, and it's allowed to actually defend it. It fails as an interpretation because it tries to parallel the message and fails. Let me expand. Why does West Side's story as an interpretation of Romeo and Juliet work? Because it touches on the key elemental plot points that Romeo and Juliet set up, and therefore made it identifiable with the source material. If it hadn't, it wouldn't have been an interpretation, it would have just been its own piece. And that wouldn't have necessarily been a bad thing, but the worst possible combination is when you so blatantly try to mirror the original by ripping the beat, the key hooks, and the phrases to the point of mimicry, and yet in everything you change, you fail. That's what Nicole Arbour's done, in the most atrocious, borderline insulting way possible. That's not saying that you can't integrate source material into crafting a different message. Plenty of artists have done that. Stan and Eminem sampling Dido's Thank You is an excellent example, but that worked because it was totally consistent. In this instance, the context provided with the original just shows up Arbour's cover in an even more embarrassing way. Childish Gambino crafts this greater message about about social media. It is essential to the song, to the point where if you removed it, the other messages from the song wouldn't make sense. Arbor, yeah, she does mention social media. In her own words, social media on modern relationships and self. Now, if we are to try and unpack that vagueness in comparison, we can assume that with the subtle symbolism, wink, fucking wink, in the video that she is referring to the culture of vanity and self-consciousness that seems more prevalent with females on social media, perpetuated through unrealistic beauty standards. With regards to social media on relationships, there isn't much to see in the video, although I assume that the handing out of hearts following the wedding is how relationships have evolved from families to women seeking confirmation through guys and their social media hearts rather than actual love. You know, the sort of thing that Hollywood thought it was trendy to point out in like 2010? If I removed these two messages, nothing would change about the video. They're not integral. This is some of those derivative box-ticking activism in the face of one of the most multifaceted artistic statements in a while. And its vapid, surface-level approach to the messages is so transparent. So transparent. And now I wanted to talk about two other topics, which is apparently the labels and the pressures. And yes, you know what? It is a shame that society is judgmental sometimes. And it's so common, you've probably done it a fair few times yourself. You ever look at a fat person and think, boy, why don't they just lose some weight? There's nothing. We do that. It's called heuristics. We create certain stereotypes of characteristics that make it easier for us to judge people. They're flawed mechanisms, but a lot of people use them nonetheless. This was also addressed in a song called Follow Your Arrow by Casey Musgraves a few years ago. An infinitely better song, which is much nicer on the ears as well, and it deals with the issues of a judgmental society in a more compact, listenable and nuanced way. The issue is, as Musgraves points out, that most of us are going to be regularly exposed to heuristics and stereotypes of what people think we're like. And yet in the chorus she declares that you might as well just do whatever the fuck you want and do your best to work with it. Slanted one way that much is questionable. Equality in this instance is a nice ideal, but the only real equality you'll get between demographics is when those within the demographics are equally as judgmental. You'll never really eradicate it, but if you want to try, you should probably start to practice what you preach. You've already noticed that throughout this section I've chucked in various references to other and, in my opinion, better music and art. That's because there is nothing inspired here. It's rehashed old content that would have been dated in its message a decade ago. There are numerous artists who dealt with this in a much more chill way and don't have to fuck up another song in the process, and in doing so completely skewed its own message because it failed to understand how connected the messages of the original were. She couldn't even interpret it to make it culturally specific about the United States of America. She clarifies in this video rapping, "We'll say North America." None of this is remotely unique to any South American country either. You think that literally every problem you've listed here in South America? And if you try to demonstrate an all-American image, a lot of Gambino's messages stand alone do not amount to specific scenarios. For the way he creates a subtext and molds them together makes the final image a lot more identifiable with the thesis statement. That is not present in Arbor's version, and there is a lot to be said for its musical failures, which is where we're fucking going next.
Going to need
as I pointed out earlier, Arbor's song fails as an interpretation because she takes so many of the devices used in the original, but also tries to substitute elements that create this incoherent mess. But let's try to break down the specifics that aid the creation of such a failure, and on a technical level, where the flaws really come to show in why Nicole should maybe have given this endeavour a break. Let's compare the interpretation with the original.
No, I didn't want to press continue.
Version is that she relies on text over subtext. A lot of what Childish Gambino's work focuses on is that a very high majority of the lyrics would not be out of place on any brag rap song, and therefore by contrasting them with the grim reality of the connotations, it allows the message to be conveyed quite smartly. Nicole rips many lines from Gambino's original, and therefore you need it to be consistent with a balance of text to subtext. However, a lot of the changes she makes tend to push towards surface level text. A really simple example of how it doesn't work is the switching of slipping for climbing in the chorus. In Gambino's song, the line "Don't catch you slipping now" has an urgency of how an individual may want to watch themselves. One wrong move could cause dangerous repercussions, but the delivery almost revels in it. Many rappers enjoy invoking the idea of fear over their enemies. Arbor uses "Don't catch you climbing" as a statement about women's lack of social mobility, but the issue there is that there is no subtext. People don't glorify the glass ceiling. Okay, so she changes it a bit. Not a huge problem until you try to mimic the subtext. In the original, Gambino uses multiple lines with a lot of subtext. One example I could extract is "the police be tripping now," which to me is used to demonstrate how rappers often mock the problems that don't affect them anymore, despite them purportedly remaining prevalent within their former societies. Nicole Arbour switches this and says "the boys be tripping now." Now, firstly, in this moment, it's already hard to identify subtext because many of the issues she identifies in her Instagram don't necessarily go away with success, but it also creates a very confusing contextual narrative, whereas Childish Gambino's rap portrays an unsettlingly ignorant caricature. Nicole Arbour's character regularly switches back and forth between Childish Gambino-esque mimicry and just another activist pointing out these problems within society. At one point, she literally responds to her own observation, going, "What the fuck?" creating this completely inconsistent narrative which is impossible to follow. It's really fucking sloppy on a technical level, which even if what she was trying to say was
You're not even paying attention to Leah.
in the delivery because she tried to nab certain themes and abandon others, not realizing they were all complementary to each other. And as soon as you desert that, you end up with this. What else can we say about this then? Well, Arbour doesn't necessarily quite nail the delivery either. In Gambino's rapper recited his verses coldly with a very deadpan delivery, which often played contrast to his very flamboyant choreography. Arbour, on the other hand, is vocally all over the place. I am aware that she is known for her exuberant performances, but by having such a hammy she claims that the tone is tongue-in-cheek on her Instagram, and maybe that would explain. Changing your voice does not enhance the song. In fact, the art of tongue-in-cheek content requires some maintenance of the tone of the original, while creating surreal different scenarios for the versa, and it certainly doesn't work. Vocals slapped all over the musical interludes are not done very well either. Gambino's have clearly been very carefully placed with regards to the instrumentation. The opening set of vocals are particularly well mixed, with the lyrics just creeping through but drowned out in a sinister mix. It really creates this haunting atmosphere. In Arbour's, it just sounds like she's had a few too many vodkas before the studio session. The instrumental has also been awkwardly changed. Performance in the dentist drill synth is slathered on the top of the mix, and it sounds extremely impulsive bass line to the back of the mix. Because anyone making those production decisions did not do them out of love. Minutes and a half of this song, which is just awful. Firstly, she says this, which is just diabolical, considering the context of the song and on a technical level alone. She then proceeds to make a clumsily delivered line about the Taliban before taking a moment to actually explain the reference, which is not something you as an artist should ever convey awkwardly, which she does. Bad line, which it is. Then she does a interpretation of that quirky Childish Gambino moment, before following this with an outro reflecting Gambino's video. The video finishes with the quotes, "If I were a guy, you wouldn't be asking yourself, I wonder who wrote that." But I think we can say with a decent amount of confidence that Nicole Arbour definitely wrote that, because heaven knows who else would consciously attach their name to such a messy statement. I'm being harsh, but this all comes across to me as incredibly lazy, ham-fisted, and lacking any sort of real investment from its performer. Although I do concur with a lot of the original source material, I don't agree with every single measures that I have derived from it, and I wouldn't expect to, but I do have a hell of a lot of respect with how it works as an artistic statement. Arbour has no grip of that. The content doesn't work as satire because the messages hold no weight and the humour is dead. It doesn't work as a social statement because there is nothing more than observations of problems that don't even tie into the supposed overarching narrative. It doesn't work as a musical piece because the music isn't original and nowhere near as well mixed as the original. And when you have so many other musicians making better crafted social statements, why would you ever choose someone who basically uses a quote good cause as a shield to make this? And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people think that marching under a banner of righteousness will somehow alleviate criticism, but it should not, and it won't round here. And I'm kind of relieved that of all people, Nicole Arbour did it, because she's not very ally with anyone. But I still worry how many people criticise her on this move on the basis of very superficial factors, as if anyone else making the points here would somehow improve the video. No, it is bad regardless, and it is time we put it to bed. In the Instagram response, Arbour says a fair few things that I would like to challenge. I've already addressed her first few paragraphs fairly comprehensively. I don't know if any issue presenting your own take on This Is America, but you have to nail down key narrative anchors, and that's what I feel are the false flags on her face in this instance. She tries to make her post a message of positivity and empathy and kindness, and talk about how she believes the best thing to happen is for people to record their own version of the video and talk about their own personal experience. And I think that underlines how badly she's missed the message of Gambino's video. The original touches on themes that, although may be affecting certain demographics more than others, is not a personal experience, it's a greater cultural statement. You don't need This Is America to talk about your own personal experiences in America. There's always a musical platform to do that. So if you do understand the context of This Is America, you should also understand that it's not personal and doesn't need loads of people trying to make their own personalized versions of it. Because otherwise you're changing the context to the point where the only things you're retaining are the title and the beats. The only way to remake new interpretations
Mix it.
of this would be to make...
Don't put it back if it's empty.
Even then,
Wait, no, you're not
trying
using
to
it
avoid
correctly. That's why I'm
scrambling
like so
multiple
nervous.
coincided messages. The rate...
Bro, read the instructions. What does it say? What does it say? Shake. You're supposed to put it completely upside down and then put it upside down. What's this?
Put something else in.
What? Bob, what are you doing?
The same thing that you're doing.
No, I'm not. I'm looking at my financial aid.
Exactly.
You're fooling around.
Hey, you too.
change the message so much.
I'm looking at my
There's no point
financial
in
aid.
using the source as the foundation. As I mentioned earlier, she drops in this notion of North America as some sort of deflection. Arbet is implying that this is not the US or Canada. Firstly, if that's the case, you shouldn't have titled your video exactly the same as the original, because everyone's going into it expecting reference to the United States of America. I get you're equivocating it to the continent, but it's a pretty misleading equivocation of the context provided. Secondly, including Canada seems literally just a way to dodge the "you're not American" criticism. It doesn't enhance the points, nor does it make it more unique when you include Canada, and therefore the point is just lost in a seemingly rhetorical distraction device. I'm all for empathy. I'm sure others will tell you, Nicole, there is no gentleman more empathetic than yours truly. But peace, love, and positivity will not make a bad song good. I will never write off a person with good intentions, but I will write off their execution. And this is often a problem with Nicole. She seems to make these arguments in the more controversial videos, and although the core messages may not be corrupted, they're delivered in such an assertive way that they undermine any notion of empathy that she might want to get across. They're so directed they make the subject of the video defensive over their identity rather than attempting to listen to what she's trying to say. I have no doubt that people just saw some of her Dear People videos and immediately disliked because of the attitude that such a title radiates. The controversy drowns out whatever message you claim to be promoting, rendering the message itself pointless. And even then, a substantial narrative. This video just coasts off controversy over a message that is barely there, and certainly nothing remotely thought-provoking. There are thousands of better ways you can raise awareness to your issues, and I do not believe you're ignorant to them. And therefore, my verdict on your response is bullshit. I don't care if you're offensive, controversial, so on. Comedy is that sometimes, and I don't think we should ever sacrifice that. But if you want to make decent social commentary within that comedy, in my opinion, you're not doing it right. This latest venture of This Is America is barely identifiable as comedy. I think most people are still not 100% sure of what it's meant to be, and so in the end it just ends up like a mess. And all it becomes identifiable for is its controversial premise, which is inevitably picked up by semi-famous commentators to explain why this song doesn't sound nice. Which is fine, they can do that. But there's so many more layers of bad to this that it had to be laid to rest, and hopefully that's what I've done today. If you care about learning, then the first thing you will do is learn that great content takes time, and having a written, recorded, choreographed song out barely a week after the original in such a half-baked manner does not reflect that philosophy. It seems like a trending cash grab, and I'm not saying that's what you did, but that's how many perceived it, and due to it, they rejected your message altogether, which surely is not what you want, correct? Take-home message: causes are important to people. If you want to see change in the world, more power to you. Work for it, but do it gracefully and try to avoid appearing to piggyback of other causes in the process. I don't believe a cause's validity necessarily hinges on the proponent alone, and Arbor is no prominent member of such a cause, but if she herself cares about it, she should care about how people may judge it, and I think that's what raises red flags on her motivations. I think they are very justified red flags. The song itself is uninspired and poorly written, showing a very surface level understanding of problems relevant to our society, and it does not deserve a pass for its message alone. Even if the message was decent, which, as I've discussed, is debatable, they're hardly problems relevant in the way the original presented them, and it rips narrative from the original while introducing new elements that don't work either. I know a lot of people already hate this, but hopefully I've given more of a justification for why people hate it. It's not just a white versus black issue as Vice have portrayed it, but plenty more legitimate criticisms that if you care, you won't ignore. Otherwise, I think it's time we let this die. R.I.P. Anyhow, want to give a big shout out to the editors who once again have done a fantastic job. All their links are going to be in the description below. Some of them make great content, and if you have the time, go and click on the links and drop them yourself. Any other thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comment section below. I'm always open to discussion, though sometimes it does get a bit too toxic for me, admittedly. Otherwise, you can reach me on Facebook, you can reach me on Twitter. I have open DMs. I tend to reply to most people. Also, I'm trying to be more active in my Discord server that is currently failing. I will get there in the end. Trust me on that one. Otherwise, I don't think there's too much else to say.
Yes, my dear. Allí. ¿Quieres que lo vote? ¿Quieres algo más? Oh, y eso de allá. ¿Eso? ¿Eso?
Until then, however, I'm the right opinion, and I'll see you.
El Game Cube Boy. Eso es lo que estaba allí. ¿Quieres algo más? ¿Te gustaría algo de picar? ¿Una bebida?
Yo quiero picar, pico la cabeza de alguien.
That's good.
Picarle a Jenny, que siempre le pica.
Ya le piqué la cabeza a alguien.
Oh.
Ahora va a sentir la picazoncita del pelo saliendo.
Bien, por primera vez.
Are you bullying me?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot I was streaming.
Oh, wow. Estás diciendo eso que iban a pensar vulgaridades.
Je parle français et anglais.
Ah, no, social.
Je parle español.
No.
Sí, pone, ¿cómo se llama? Igual así, güey.
Put a movie or something.
No movie.
One of the docudrama thingies. Jenny?
I don't know.
Américain. ¿Más que américain? Marie pas anglais.